Here we are again, another week. It's just been raining. The plants are happy, the wind's happy, the birds are happy. But are you happy? I assume not. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Look, what I want to talk about is something quite serious today, and something that you can actually assist me with. I want to talk about the United Liberation Movement of West Papua. On the 1st of December, the United Liberation Movement of West Papua did something quite extraordinary. They set up a provisional government, well, actually a transitional government, more than a provisional government, a transitional government in West Papua itself. The two parliament houses in West Papua both voted to set up a transitional government, and obviously the 1st of December is very important in the West Papuan calendar, because that's their Independence Day. It's the day that the Morning Star, their flag, rises. Now, why should anybody really care about West Papua? Well, we all care about what's happening in the Middle East and other parts of the world where things aren't as good as they should be. But it's quite extraordinary how little interest is shown by the Australian government and opposition, as well as the Australian people, about West Papua. West Papua is only 75 kilometres from Australia. That's 75 kilometres. In 2006, over 40 refugees took a traditional canoe from West Papua to North Australia and sought asylum. A traditional canoe across 75 kilometres of ocean. So 75 kilometres isn't very far. Think of the town nearest you, which is 75 kilometres away. The second thing is, over the last 60 years, we have seen one of the most brutal genocides, and I never use that word genocide, occur in the world. And I'll give you a bit of history. Now, West Papua is important because it's got some of the world's greatest gold deposits. It has virgin forests which haven't been cut down or exploited. It has extraordinary productive fisheries around it. And the Dutch had been in charge of Indonesia for over 400 years until independence came. I think it was in 1949 or was it 48. But they held on to West Papua because it was such a rich source for them. But in 1961, the Indonesian government basically took over West Papua by force from the Dutch and incorporated it into the Indonesian state. Now, the West Papuans have nothing in common with Indonesia. It is basically a Melanesian society, which we see across the Pacific, obviously including in Papua New Guinea, in the Solomons. It's a Melanesian, Fiji, it's a Melanesian society. So when the Indonesians took over in 1961, they had a bodgy referendum where they asked 1,000 chiefs whether they wanted to join Indonesia or not, and obviously they had no choice. Obviously nobody in West Papua was asked, and since then we have seen an extraordinary amount of murder and dispossession and rape in this country. An extraordinary amount. And many Christian missionaries, fundamentalist Christian missionaries, have had a long association with the people of West Papua. And what we've seen over the last 60 years is not just the dispossession of the West Papuan people, not just them being forbidden to use their language, and they have to use the Indonesian language in schools, not just the fact that they are constantly subjected to racism, not just the fact that there are military garrisons across West Papua, but the West Papuans have been conducting a guerrilla struggle for the last 60 years in the mountains, as well as a political struggle. And in 2017, something quite extraordinary happened as far as the West Papuan Liberation Movement was concerned, which consisted of 3 separate groups. They united for the first time. So after 57 years, we have a united liberation movement for West Papua, and since then, things have moved quickly. Now, I first became in contact with the West Papuans, refugees and asylum seekers living in Australia, 6 years ago, and it was obvious they were having a lot of difficulty conducting their struggle in this country for a variety of reasons. problems, most of which are related to poverty, surveillance by the Indonesian government. That's right, the Indonesian government has spies here in Australia and has continual surveillance of West Papuan activists, as well as obviously the Australian government, the Australian Secret Service, Home Affairs, all continue to monitor the West Papuan situation. Neither the Labor Party or the Liberal Party have a West Papuan policy. The Australian Greens support West Papuan independence. Let's not forget that. To give you an example how difficult things are politically in Australia for the West Papuans, when a Darwin activist was killed in a accident about 4 years ago, a senator, the DLP senator, put up a condolence motion in the Senate, and that condolence motion did not go ahead because the ALP and the Liberal National Party would not support the condolence motion unless the word West Papua was removed. And since then, we've had this government kowtowing constantly to the Indonesian government. It's interesting. Mr. Morrison and his crew like to, play about the Chinese. They like to carry on about the Chinese intervention in this country's affairs. But they don't carry on about Indonesian intervention in this country's affairs, the fact there are Indonesian spies in this country whose main task is to keep an eye on West Papuan asylum seekers and refugees. So what has all this got to do with you? Obviously you've got a comfortable life. What's it all got to do with you? Well, it's simple. 6 years ago I formed the West Papua Rent Collective, and I've been the convener for the last 6 years. The West Papua Rent Collective is a very simple concept. Australians donate $1 a day and pay for an office in Docklands, in Collins Street, in Docklands in Melbourne, which acts as a organising centre for the United Liberation Movement of West Papua, the West Papuan Women's Office, and the list goes on and on. Now, when you're an activist, you spend 90% of your time trying to raise money to support infrastructure and 10% of your time actually being involved in political, social and cultural activity. But the fact that we pay the rent, the West Papuan Rent Collective pays the rent, allows the West Papuan movement to continue that struggle and promote that struggle towards independence. And if you think this is just a little office in Collins Street in Docklands in Melbourne, think again. This is the only office that West Papuans have outside of West Papua in the world. It plays a critical role in coordinating the peaceful transition from Indonesian hands into their own hands. It is specifically designed to coordinate the West Papuan liberation struggle around the world. It's specifically designed in order to garner support from other sovereign nation states so that the question of West Papuan independence is finally put on the United Nations Decolonisation Committee program, because you need 75 sovereign nation states to support independence before it can be debated at the United Nations decolonisation meetings. So this office has been instrumental in pushing this struggle. It was instrumental in helping to unite the various factions, the three factions of the West Papuan Liberation Movement in 2017. It's been instrumental in helping to set up the Melanesian Spearhead Group, which is a group of Melanesian sovereign nation states who have now come together under the leadership of Vanuatu to support the question of West Papuan independence. Now, just to give you an example of how difficult things have been in West Papua, over 500,000 people have been killed through starvation, through not adequate medical care, but many tens of thousands have been killed by the Indonesian military, which uses West Papua as its personal fiefdom, because it is a very profitable area for the Indonesian generals to exploit. And there are thousands of troops, Indonesian troops in Indonesia, and guess what? Where are their crack troops? They're SAS, trained. And let's not forget the brutality of our own SAS in Afghanistan. Where is those Indonesian officers trained? They are trained in Australia. They are trained by the Australian Armed Forces. So we do have blood on our hands, because Indonesian military, especially their special units, have a long history of bloody reprisals and shooting without asking questions, imprisonment, torture, and people just ending up on the street shot dead. So it took a lot of courage for the West Papuan people, who have been heavily involved in riots and protests over the last 12 months, to bring forward West Papua Independence, to set up a transitional government. Now, this transitional government does not want to deport the 1 million Indonesians who have come across to West Papua in the last 60 years, who have been given free land by the government in order to break the relationship between the West Papuan population and their traditional lands. It wants to accommodate these people in this new country, where each person gets one vote. So this is an extraordinary, compassionate response by the West Papuans, considering that over 500,000 have been killed in the last 60 years. And we're not talking of a population of 20 million. We are talking of a population of about 1.2 million West Papuans. And when you look at the population of Papua New Guinea, which is, the other half of the New Guinea archipelago, you will see that the population of Papua New Guinea is about almost 3.2 million. And it's quite possible that the population of West Papua should have been exactly the same. So what we are seeing is this United Liberation Movement coming together and pursuing political campaign amongst the country's nation states. They've got support in the Pacific through the Melanesian Spearhead Group. They've actually now gained majority support within the African group. They've also gained support amongst many Caribbean nations. So it won't be long before the question of West Papua independence is placed on the United Nations decolonisation list. But more than that, there are more people around the world who are now supporting the concept of West Papuan independence. So what can you do? Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm the coordinator or the convener for the West Papua Rent Collective in Melbourne, which pays the rent for an office which plays a pivotal role outside West Papua to promote West Papuan independence in the various forums around the world. And the whole point about this is one, it allows our West Papuan brothers and sisters to conduct their struggle the way they would like, without having to worry about financial issues. We don't support financially any of their activities. The only thing the West Papuan Rent Collective does is pay the rent. We need 75 people to be on the Rent Collective to pay $1 a day. So what's $1 a day to you? Well, if you're a person about town, it's 2 cappuccinos. If you like to buy your breakfast, occasionally, it's a plate of smashed avocado on toast or a large pizza. So for a very small contribution, you can actually be part of an independence movement to ensure that the military boot is taken off the West Papuans' neck, and they'll be in a position to rule their own country, use their own resources to look after the interests of the people living in West Papua today. Not just the original Melanesians, but also the million Indonesians, which have been brought across by transmigration programs. Now, you can do it anonymously, you can do it openly. Obviously, I do it openly, and most of our members do it openly. It's very simple. We don't send you reminders, nobody rings you up, nobody emails you. It's $1 a day. We'll give you the banking details. You can walk into any Commonwealth Bank branch. You can do it on the internet. You can do it virtually. You can do it any way you like. But $1 a day, you can pay $365 up front for the year, or you can pay every month. And what that does is it supports the office. We are now about to enter the 6th year that the West Papua Rent Collective has been in existence, the 6th year that this office in Docklands, in Collins Street in Melbourne, has been instrumental in promoting the West Papuan political, cultural struggle. It's instrumental. But unfortunately, in 2020, because of the COVID-19 crisis, the death of a number of our members, and our members tend to be, it's not the rich and powerful who join the West Papua Rent Collective. It's people on disability support pensions, old age pensions, people on low wages, people who understand what it is, what it feels like to suffer the boot of oppression. These are the people that join the West Papua Rent Collective. It doesn't mean that if you earn a lot of money, we don't want you. Obviously, we're happy to have anybody's money who supports West Papua Independence. Now, you can do it in a number of ways. You can go to their website, DFAT, D-F-A-I-T, Federal Republic of West Papua, and to take down the details. You can ring me on 0439 395 489, 0439 395 489, and I can email you the details, or I can post out the details to you. It's based on an honour system. Currently we are about 25 members short, and I don't exaggerate that if we don't get the 25 new members within the next 4 to 5 months, the office will close in June next year. That's 2021, which would be a great pity, considering we're not talking about thousands of dollars every week or every day. We're talking about a rent of about $2,400 a month, and that includes access to all the facilities in a building. It's a 7-star energy rated building, if you're concerned about those type of things. It's got its own community garden. It's got they've got their own office, as well as common rooms which are used for seminars. Normally we have 3 gatherings for the Rent Collective every year. We've just had only one this year. We had a few virtual ones, only one this year, which was held on the 6th of December. The next one will be in early March next year, and obviously if you're a member of the Rent Collective, you are more than welcome to come along and see. At any time, you can actually ring up the office, get the phone number on the web, or email them, make an appointment, go in, have a look at the office, see what they're doing, and make up your mind whether you want to be a member of the Rent Collective. I don't think it's much of an impost to ask you to help these people, because not only does it help these people, it also helps us. It helps us as a nation, because what it does, it will give us a very important relationship with the people of West Papua once they achieve independence. I mean, people talk about the Chinese government, taking over the Pacific. Well, this is one way that we can actually have sovereign, independent nation states, 3 of the tentacles of this, the planet's superpowers, whether it be United States of America or China or even Russia. So it is important. It is important to us. And let's not forget, we've just had Eureka Day on the 3rd of December. Let's not forget that the West Papuan activists come and support us on Eureka Day, and they support us because they understand the principles which Eureka were based on, and the principles which their independence movement is based on. They understand these things, and we have much more in common than being geographically close, 75-kilometre distance between West Papua and the north of Australia. We also stand side by side in the night skies, and if you look up in the night skies, you will see the Southern Cross, which is a symbol of resistance in this country, and Eureka, and you will see the Morning Star, which is the symbol of West Papuan independence, which is the primary feature on their flag, a flag for which hundreds, if not thousands of people have been murdered by the Indonesian authorities when they raised the flag illegally in that country on the 1st of December. So let's not forget, these people need our assistance. It's a good way to foster good relationships in our region, and I think it's about time that we supported this office for much longer than the 5.5 years that we've done to date. So think about it, give us a call, or you can also go to their website, have a look, and don't forget, it will be in the news over the next few weeks. You will see more bloodshed, you will see more Indonesian brutality, because, as I keep saying, West Papua is an exceptionally rich sovereign nation state. Its people should be living good lives, but It is basically a fiefdom of the Indonesian military, and the Indonesian government has little say what actually happens in West Papua because it is controlled by the Indonesian military, which is supported, financed to some degree, and trained, especially the specialist troops they use in West Papua, by the Australian Defence Forces.